And I do believe that we have some time for question and answer.
So we do have some time. If there's some questions out there, I'll bring the microphone back to you and you can ask Bridgette and we have a conversation. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So right now the immediate concern is how this is going to be impacting the public schools, but absolutely that is a concern for Christian schools and other private schools. A lot of schools that aren't Christian-based private schools, they're already trending this way. I actually almost put this slide in, but I decided not to because it was about private schools. There are already schools in New York, private schools, like all-girls schools, that have now said that they're going to be open to transgendered individuals. So I think a lot of that has to do with the school, the administration, how it's run and what their values are, and how much they're going to be willing to stand against the cultural tide that's coming. Because again, as we're seeing, this is already moving in New York State. It's just going to force the public schools to do it immediately if the bills get passed. But we're going to see that cultural pressure on all of the schools and every kind of educational. I have to say, even in the Christian stuff, so I have 2 kids that I've chosen to homeschool. I went through public school all the way up through high school, and I went to a state school for my undergraduate degree, but my husband and I decided to homeschool our kids. Even looking at some Christian literature right now, I got Christian literature and I read it and I was starting to blush and I'm thinking, I'm supposed to read this to my kids right now? No way. And so we're going to see that the culture is going to impact all of these areas, private schools, even homeschool curriculums. There are websites out there now that because of COVID and the big push to kind of homeschool your kids, there's a lot of people homeschooling their kids who are not Christians, and so there's a lot of websites that have popped up that are like, great homeschool lessons for you. And a lot of this comprehensive sex ed and gender ideology are just being snuck in and taught through that. So everybody, no matter whether you're homeschooling or not, you have to be very diligent to realize what it is that your kids are getting access to. So that's a great question.
And if I could just comment on that question too, Ed, I think that we have to keep in mind that if the school takes the money, again, we're back to the funding. Where the funding is involved, schools are going to be much more apt to say yes to this. So our little school here, with our 118 students, we're not ever going to do this, ever. We don't take a penny from the state, and we won't take a penny from the state because we know that it comes with a loss of autonomy. We know that it complicates things. Amen. And it causes compromise. And so somehow this funding situation that our public schools are in right now, it is at the heart of why the state is able to make this stuff actually happen. And I agree that what's going on in some of the private schools is definitely the culture is impacting it. And I'll tell you what, I took my students to a college fair, a Christian college fair, a few years ago, and I was shocked at what our Christian colleges. Now, I'm not saying all of them. There's great Christian colleges out there. There's great Bible colleges out there. Don't just assume that because it's got a Christian name that it's good to go. You have got to do your diligence as parents. And I did receive some information recently from a Christian college, and right at the top of my head, I can't remember which one it was, but the counselor that was interacting was letting us know his pronouns. And so it's there. Other questions?
So you can mention that parents should go in to talk to the school, find out what's going on. My question is, the school is all about deception. So if a child can go in, dress like a cute little dress, whatever, and go in and change as a boy, but you change back to your little dress and go home. So they are teaching that child to be deceptive. So when the parent comes in to find out what the curriculum is, what's going on, they're going to replace it. Thrives off of deception. Will they be honest to tell them what's going on? Can they hide things and not let you know and tell little Johnny or little Jolene, don't go home and tell your mommy, and then you may never know. So that's the scary part to me.
That is a great question, and what we are seeing is that part of this whole issue with the parents is being pushed on the kids because they're saying, well, if your parents don't agree with you and they don't affirm you, then that's going to lead you to suicide. And so it's this idea that the schools are trying to protect the kids in their own way by leaving out the parents. And that's one of the reasons why you just kind of have to do your due diligence in this, that yes, you might have some school members or things like that who are trying to hide what's going on, but right now you have the right to ask and you have the right to be involved and you have the right to go observe the classes. And so it is one of those things that you just have to, that's why we're encouraging you to speak about this with other parents, post things on Facebook, share what's going on, so that even if you didn't catch it or your kid's not coming home and telling you, hopefully some of the other kids are in that school saying, whoa, wait a second, this just happened, and at least one parent knows about it, and then you can talk about it and you can address it with the school. But yes, this is going to have to be something where you really are going to have to dig in some cases. Now, hopefully the schools are just honest and they give you the curriculum or they say, here's the lesson plans. But, you know, it's kind of our responsibility to make sure that we actually are seeing what's happening.
I actually have a question. Is it safe to assume if school board members, if people in the community start to run for school board, opposing the agenda that seems to be trickling in and sometimes flooding into our schools, should we assume that there will be outcry from the activists? I mean, should we be anticipating that the mob is going to show up?
So I think in some cases, yes, you are going to see that. You might have activist teachers in schools, or you might have the information that I shared with you about Pittsford. It's a suburban school in Rochester, and at that board meeting, like half of the parents were all for the rainbow clubs and the other half of the parents were against the rainbow clubs. So when we have these conversations with people and we are presenting our concern, we can go to some of the science behind this, some of the biology behind it, some of the harms that are being done. I mean, there are studies that show that this is harmful. And what we're actually finding is that there are some organizations out there, like the one parent guide that I had up there before, and there were like 5 organizations that helped write that guide. There was a lesbian organization that helped with that guide. And so what we're even finding is that there are organizations out there who we might not agree with totally on just the way that they do everything or what they stand for, but the harm is real and the biology is real. And so when you can have a conversation with somebody about that, what they are often trying to push is, well, it's just everybody's rights and, you know, it's just their own personal preferences. And yet when you come back kind of with the science and the harms, and we realize that we really are hurting these kids, we're not helping them, that's one of those ways that we can have that conversation with people, even when people try to stand up and disagree with us. They might be loud, they might be activists, but there is truth on our side, and so we can stand behind that. Yeah, so great question. So first of all, I just want to say this. We are in no way trying to disparage teachers. Many of these teachers who are teaching gender ideology or even comprehensive sex education, they believe that they're doing the right thing, that they're doing good. As I mentioned with that organization out there, there are so many organizations that are pushing really hard to say that comprehensive sex ed is the best because some of these alternatives are lacking information or they're not sharing the right information with your kids. So these teachers in these classrooms oftentimes believe that they are doing good to the children. That's why we need to, like you said, we need to know our teachers. We need to have these conversations with them and to speak the truth to them so that they understand that there are harms coming along with what they're teaching the children. Now, I think some of the things that happened in that Livonia school came about because of the whole transgender celebration day or week, and so I think a lot of those things were being pushed. So yeah, in some ways, if you ask for a curriculum or a lesson plan, you might not really see what's happening. So that idea of personally getting to know the teachers, your kids' teachers, the teachers in each of the grades, that is a great idea. Now, some of that would have to come through just sitting and observing some of the classrooms, but obviously if you hit a regular math class, you're not going to hear about, you know, that teacher necessarily teaching the transgender videos. So at least with the comprehensive sex ed, you can go to the school and say, what curriculum do you guys use at each of these grade levels to teach sex ed? And they can give you those curriculums, and if necessary, then they can pass you along to the teachers that teach that, and you can ask for individual lesson plans. Now again, though, if those teachers aren't teaching it and it's already outsourced by another organization like Planned Parenthood, again, you'd have to go to that organization and you would have to ask them for the curriculum so that you can view it. Or you can even ask to talk to some of their representatives that go and teach this in the school and ask them what they're teaching and that type of stuff. So yeah, you kind of have to start off just by digging a little bit and saying what is being taught at these grades. Also, you can go and ask them what their bullying prevention requirements are, what their school policies are for these things. So you kind of have to ask the right questions and start being able to find that information out, and hopefully it would lead you to, okay, we've gotten an honest answer, we see what is being taught or what's in the schools. So that's a great question.
Does every school have CSE?
No. So
that's the first question to your...
Yes, so that's the first question, is comprehensive sex ed is not necessarily in every school, because right now it's the local district and the school that decides what curriculum gets put in there. If the bill passes, then they won't have a choice. They have to choose some of these curriculums that conform to the standards. So right now the question is comprehensive sex ed being taught in my child's school? And how is gender ideology being brought into my child's school? Is it through things like bullying prevention, the counseling office? Are there after-school clubs that are teaching it? So you have to then kind of ask those questions about the school to figure out what's going on in that school.
And it sounds like you really need to be communicating with your kids
Yeah,
constantly.
that would be the first thing.
Although as I think about it, I remember myself as a teenager, I would have been, I don't know if I would have told my mom and dad. You know, I think I would have been so nervous as a teenager that my dad might show up. No, that's not something that I would have wanted to happen, because it would have been so, horrifying for a young person. But ultimately, we need to be cultivating that relationship with our children where they will share with us what they are hearing, what they are experiencing, what's going on in their classrooms.
So I'll just share really quick that we actually sent our daughter to a private school. I tried to homeschool her when she was in preschool, and she's a lot like me, very independent-minded, and she wanted to be the teacher. So I sent her to private school for 1 year just so she can kind of get the hang of things. And she came, it was like 1 month later, and we were talking about something, and she just directly said, no, that's not how it is, because my teacher said so. And I thought, whoa, 1 month into a private school, this is a Christian private school, and you're already questioning the authority of the parent and taking the authority of the teacher. And so, in that moment, I wanted to be like, no, I know right, and so does your daddy, he's got a PhD. And then I was like, oh no, wait, I don't want to go there, because then they're going to be thinking that their college professors have the truth. And so, thankfully, it was one of those things that we just kind of kept talking, and she said, oh, but, I know about this in the Bible or something like that. And I was like, thank you, Lord. Yes, I just have to trust in you that if I keep having these conversations with my kids, that God is also working on them. And so when we do send them to school, whichever school we send them to, whether it's private or Christian or public or even with homeschooling lessons, that it's that idea that we respect our authorities, and so then we can teach them to respect their authorities, and that God wants us to have a mind and think about these things. And so yes, that we can teach our kids to do that too. That is definitely, absolutely, very, very important. We should start off praying about this. One of the things that has really encouraged me is at one of the meetings that we had a while ago in my area, it was actually a gentleman that stood up and said this. Part of that question is, other than the things that we know that we can do, so absolutely pray, go talk to your kids first, and then go talk to the schools and figure out what's happening right there in your area, and then share that information. Those are things that you can wake up tomorrow and do. But other than that, part of this is that we have to wait on the Lord. There are going to be hundreds of thousands of kids that are taking cross-sex hormones, that are mutilating their bodies, that are becoming promiscuous or engaging in sexual activity because they think that it's okay now because they've been taught about it. Those kids are gonna need to turn somewhere when they realize that what they went after was not satisfying. And so part of me, I feel like I'm kind of maybe feeling a little bit of that struggle of what do we really do about this? What's that kind of practical step that we take? And that's kind of how I feel, is like I just want to go out there and if I can just charge around the world and say stop doing this to the kids. But part of this is we just have to wait on the Lord. He knows what's happening, and we have to be ready and not shy. We have to be able to stand up and say, there is a more positive message. There is a place to go for healing and hope. And as much as sometimes that really irks us that we have to sit there and wait on the Lord, I think we have to be ready for that this is way bigger than any of us. And so we have to be ready with that positive message that those kids can have healing, that they can have redemption. And in the meantime, we do what we can right here in our area with the kids that we have influence over and with our own kids. So I'm not sure if that quite answered your question. I feel that angst in terms of what can we really do about it, but hopefully that is a little bit encouraging that we can share that message for those kids and be ready for when they turn. We can't force people to make decisions that we think are healthy, but we can pray for them and we can be ready for them when they come to us. And so that might just be part of it. Yeah, I would just add that on that resource list that's out there under the movies, there is a link to the video, Whose Children Are They?
We're having it in Bradford.
Okay, and so
There's a flyer up.
Okay, so some of the information that she was talking about you can find from that video, so there is a link to that too on that resource page.
And I think we'll probably wrap up. I just want to go back to our public school teacher here.
And Brenda touched on this earlier, is the funding is huge. Having conversations with people on our school board, my wife, if I can convince her to run for the school board, has been wanting to do that. So we need to get involved. To answer the one gentleman's question, you need to call your local politicians, you need to get involved, you need to start running for elections. This is the way, Greg Rieger says it all the time, we need to start at a local level and build up. Okay, if we don't, we're going to fall behind. We're already way behind. A couple things that I've observed over my 34 years of teaching. Number one is the new generation teacher that they are hiring are hybrids to propagate exactly what you presented tonight. Okay, so if we think that the new generation of teachers is going to be any less or any different than what you just talked about tonight, we are gravely mistaken. I see new hirees coming into our school all the time. My son is a senior graduating. I have a daughter who's a sophomore, and my wife was just telling me earlier, the guidance counselor just called her down just out of random and just wanted to talk with her. It's like, no, you do not talk to my child. But they are being taught that this is what they can do. Our school just opened up a kaleidoscope group, okay, and it's a rainbow flag, and if you identify with it, you get to put this sign outside of your door. The amount of doors that have this sign at our school is staggering, all right? Our superintendent, I don't want to say any names or anything like that, is someone who told me at the beginning of about a year and a half ago that there were certain things he would not allow to be into our school, and this is now happening. What can we do tomorrow morning? I love that question, okay? That question needs to be answered by simply saying, your husband addressed it and many other people did too. We need to get involved immediately. If you are sitting still, you are losing ground, and that ground that we are losing is getting far, far advanced with us. The train is so far down the tracks right now that we don't realize what we're up against, okay? And so please get involved. Talk to as many people. I love the one suggestion. Talk to people that are your neighbors. They want to hear what's going on. And you need to get people fired up, but you need to know what you're up against. All the legislation, think about it, you are a domestic terrorist, okay? If you go to a school board meeting and you speak out, everything is stacked against us, but you will be defeated if you think you are defeated, all right? So please get involved. Teach your young kids. Talk to your grandparents out there. Parents, please get involved in their lives. We need you desperately. My biggest regret is that I'm leaving the school and it's not a better place.
So wake up tomorrow morning and praise his name. Praise his name and say, I'm going to go forth today and I'm going to fight the good fight because the power of God is undiminished.
Sorry, I just want to share this really quick. So Nancy Pearcy, she was my advisor at school, and these two books by hers, Finding Truth and Love Thy Body, my degree's in philosophy, but it really helped me to be able to have these conversations with people because I understand what they're thinking and I can talk to them about what they're thinking. And so these two books I would highly recommend. It talks about the worldviews today and how you can engage in conversations with them. The Finding Truth book, she breaks it down into basically like 5 steps how you can have a conversation with somebody. It's amazing. It's super duper helpful. And then her Love Thy Body book is just much more kind of practical about just some of these sexual issues and things like that. So I would just highly recommend this. If you're looking for something to do tomorrow morning, order these books too.
Thank you, everybody. I think that we've gone well over, but I really appreciate all